Towa from IBM Research Zurich, and the following presentation is about zone encryption with anonymous authentication for vehicle-to-vehicle communication. It is based on joint work with Camenisch, Manu, Drijvers, Anja, Lehmann, and Gregory and Neven. With the upcoming autonomous vehicles, the automotive industry and several governments are developing cooperative intelligent transport systems, or CITSs. A CITS comprises vehicles, infrastructure connected to cloud services, and certification authorities who issue credentials to vehicles. Vehicles exchange so-called cooperative awareness messages, or CAMs, which typically contain semi-static information about them, such as their dimensions and sensor accuracy, and also dynamic information such as the speed, position, direction of travel, and even road and traffic condition. The infrastructure may play a role in the transmission and the authentication of such CAMs. The main requirements in terms of security and privacy are that vehicles should only accept messages that originate from other legitimate vehicles, and that vehicles should not be traceable in any way via the messages they exchange. Note that there is a high message frequency in practice, as a vehicle typically broadcasts up to 10 messages per second, and that the cryptographic overhead of each CAM is limited to 300 bytes. To develop a common approach to the deployment of CITSs, several standardization processes have been set in place. These include those of the European Committee for Standardization and ETSI. They aim at agreeing on a common, scalable technical solution across Europe. The proposals have so far mainly focused on the authentication of messages for reasons to be explained later. The main candidate for standardization adopts the following pseudonym-based approach. Vehicles are issued long-term credentials by an authority at their production. Every week, a vehicle uses its long-term credential to request revocable pseudonym certificates from another authority. The pseudonym authority then inquires about the revocation status of the vehicle. If the credential of the vehicle is still valid, the pseudonym authority then supplies the vehicle with a batch of 100 pseudonyms which are regularly switched. Using the short-lived certificates, the vehicle can sign its CAMs that it broadcasts in clear text. These signatures are essentially ECDSA signatures. Despite the appeal of this proposal, note that it enforces an undesirable trade-off between security, privacy, and efficiency. Of course, a larger pseudonym pool size provides more privacy, but it also increases the storage costs for vehicles and provides less resistance to so-called Sybil attacks. These are attacks in which an adversary impersonates many vehicles at once by corrupting a single one. So with this observation in mind, other solutions based on group signatures or anonymous credential systems have been proposed. The general strategy is to have an authority issue a single long-term revocable certificate or credential that a vehicle can then use to sign its messages. The signatures are a priori unlinkable, meaning that the credential is equivalent to an infinite pool of pseudonyms, but to abate Sybil attacks, limited spending techniques can also be used to bound the number of pseudonyms a vehicle can use in a given period of time. Unfortunately, none of these solutions fits the tight boundaries constraint of 300 bytes of cryptographic overhead per CAM. Here's where our first main contribution comes into play. A group signature scheme augmented with attributes which works as follows. Each vehicle obtains a long-term credential, revocable one, from an authority at its production. Then every week, the vehicle gets a short-lived membership credential that is tied to an attribute, namely the validity period of a week. The scheme is based on Poincaré-Lassander signatures and shares ideas with the Get Shorty scheme due to Bixel to have short group signatures which do not rely on encryption. Applied to a Cox-Finch curve of embedding degree 8 over a field of order 2 to the 544, the scheme provides 128 bits of security according to the latest estimates. The group signatures are themselves 216 bytes long, which is well within the constraints. These group signatures with the attributes solve the authentication issue of vehicle messages. Vehicles are now certain that the signed messages they receive come from other authentic vehicles, and the signatures are linkable, which may suggest that it also solves the privacy issue. But what about the messages themselves? Recall that a CAM, which is broadcasting clear text, carries both static and dynamic information about the vehicle that emits them. All this sensitive information helps track the vehicle down, and it can even be done from afar. Ill-intentioned hackers could also distribute rogue spying devices on the black market. The standardization bodies share these concerns, but no solution has so far been proposed. The natural idea would be to encrypt cams, but there's a priori no obvious practical solution since all vehicles must be able to decrypt. For example, a straightforward approach would be to embed the same symmetric key in each vehicle. The issue here is that it would then be impossible to revoke vehicles in case of corruption of a single one, and the security of the entire system would be compromised. Multi-sender broadcast encryption is another candidate, yet the ciphertext expansion is proportional to the number of revoked vehicles, and rogue keys are hard to extract. Public key tracing is an alternative, though it requires a central key distribution authority, which then becomes a single point of failure, and the existing solutions do not scale well in a setting with millions of vehicles. In any case, with any of the above solutions, it is almost impossible to detect a rogue device eavesdropping on the ongoing communication passively. Public key encryption is better in this respect, but the bandwidth restrictions do not allow for one-to-one connections or for separate ciphertexts for each receiving vehicle. Here is then our second major contribution, zone encryption. It is the core of the paper. The main idea is simple. Divide the Earth's surface in geographic zones so that the longest straight line in each zone is shorter than the transmission radius of the communication signal. Now associate to each zone a symmetric authenticated encryption key. These keys are short-lived. They should only last around 15 minutes. After a key has expired, a new zone key must be generated. Consider now what happens when a vehicle enters a zone. Using an anonymous authentication mechanism such as the previous group signatures with attributes, the vehicle broadcasts an authenticated request for the zone key for that time period. If a zone key has already been established, another vehicle in the zone broadcasts an anonymous authenticated encrypted response with the zone key. The entering vehicle can now encrypt its cams with a symmetric key shared with the other vehicles in the zone. Zone encryption therefore uses a hybrid approach that solely combines asymmetric and symmetric cryptography. The asymmetric authentication mechanism is only used for key requests and responses, whereas cams are encrypted with a symmetric authenticated encryption scheme. This results in better practical performance compared to the current proposal. Asymmetric cryptographic implementation are typically 10 times faster than elliptic curve ones. And with our specifications, the cryptographic overhead per cam is now 224 bytes at 128-bit security level. Also, using this hybrid approach, signature size and speed are no longer the bottlenecks. And thanks to the modular design, the authentication mechanism can easily be replaced with another one, say a quantum safe one. In terms of security, the combined use of anonymous authentication and symmetric authenticated encryption guarantees that all messages come from authentic vehicles. As a vehicle will also participate in the protocol to obtain the zone keys that are frequently refreshed, passive eavesdropping or even mass surveillance via the infrastructure is no longer possible. This same authentication mechanism ensures that the credential of rogue vehicles can be revoked. On the negative side, active eavesdropping is still possible, but since rogue devices must actively participate in key exchange protocols, they also expose themselves to detection in case of an abnormal event. If a rogue vehicle is exposed, its long-term credential can be revoked, and all the other devices using the same would also be revoked. This raises the bar of eavesdropping to a level that makes it unaffordable for occasional criminals, and notably more expensive for mass surveillance via a deployed network of active rogue devices. That is all for this short presentation. Please have a look at the paper for in-depth discussion on zone encryption, and feel free to send an email to the authors should you have any questions.